So I'm doing some, this is my shower valve. I had a friend of mine help me do this soldering. I've never done any soldering, disclaimer, but today we're going to give it a shot because I bought the wrong fittings. These are compression PEX A. They're the wrong fittings. So we messed this side up. Luckily we did, but otherwise I would have noticed it. So I've got to take these off and I've got to put the new fittings on. These are the Crimp fittings. And so I'm going to show you kind of what I've learned. So we're going to remove these and we're going to put a new piece of pipe here and a new fitting here. I'm just going to show you how we're going to go about doing it. And I've seen several people do it this way, and so we'll let the proof be in the pudding when we hook it up or see that there's no leaks. First, you want to remove all your guts. So these are all my guts. Your body could get very hot, and you don't want to melt those washers and all the internals. This bottom nut has a washer on it. Make sure you take it off as well. So let's get into it. I'm going to go through and scratch and clean the inside of all this. This is my new piece of pipe. I'm going to scratch and clean it up really good. I'm going to make sure all your parts are very clean. I'm going to go ahead and take these fittings off. And you see I got my torch down real low. And I'm just going to heat this fitting up until that solder melts and then pull it off. I'm heating up the fitting and not the pipe. And once my solder starts to bubble up, I'm just going to give it a little twist and pull it off. Just heat it up real slow. There you go, it's starting to melt right there. I'm not too worried about this table here. You just slowly start to heat that fitting up, and that fitting will heat up the solder. And once that solder bubbles, just kind of get a good pinch and twist it, and it'll slide right off. There he goes right there. And both of these had really good coverage for the solder. It's kind of hard to tell, but both these had really good coverage on the solder on the inside. It's just the wrong fittings. So what we're going to do is, once we get these ready, we're going to hold them up here next to it like this right here with a pair of pliers, and we're going to heat that. We're going to just hold pressure on it and heat that solder up. We'll heat this fitting up, and then in turn this fitting is going to melt that solder and it's going to suck it on. And then we're going to dab it with a little bit of flux and add a little solder to it, and that should seal it. There should be plenty of solder right here from what I researched to seal this fitting. So I went and found me a brush. I'm just going to scratch the inside of these fittings real good. And I'm going to sand this piece of pipe that I've got put. I want it to be bright copper. And I'll probably end up scratching this up with a little bit of sandpaper as well, just to be extra cautious. And I've got this, you can see I've got it sitting on a piece of plywood because my table's a little dirty. You want to make sure all your fittings are good and clean on the inside and don't get any dirt on them. Alright, so let's give this a shot. And so now I'm just going to brush it with a little bit of solder, with a little bit of flux, and we're going to add a little bit of solder to it. I'm going to heat up this side, and I'm going to add the solder to the opposite side. I heated it up, I stuck the pipe in, and there it sucked that solder just clean all the way around. And it didn't take much heat. As soon as it starts melting the solder, you take your heat away. And it's got a real good clean. There was already solder inside that joint, and once I got the pipe in there, it sucked it clean. So now I'm going to let this cool off. I'm going to do the same thing to this one. As you can tell, this one is already, it's cooled off, but it's already got solder all the way around the pipe. So once we put that new fitting on, it's already going to be a lot of solder there, and we're just going to add a little bit to it. And you just want to hold it right there. And we know it needs to go on about that far. Try to get something. There we go. So we're going to add the heat. Let me turn my. So we're going to add the heat to the fitting itself, not the pipe with the solder. Add the heat to the fitting, and the fitting heats up, then it heats the solder. Otherwise, you're going to melt the solder off and it's going to drip. And we got our heat turned down low, and so we're just going to heat the fitting up. Add a little bit of flux to it while it's good and hot still. I'm going to heat up. I'm going to add my heat to the end of this fitting, to the end of this fitting, and that way it's going to suck the. It's going to suck it. I'm going to add the flux to the opposite to where I got my heat at. And this GoPro doesn't zoom really well, but I didn't add very much solder at all, but it did add enough to suck it down and seal it, which looks really good. I'm happy with that. And so now we're going to do the same thing to this pipe right here. Let that one cool. And I've got this screwed down, that way I can work with it and I'm not fighting it. I do have a little bit of flux in here. Got a little bit of trash, looks like, in there. Let me see if I can get that trash out of there. Add a little flux to it. I'm going to add a little heat to my fitting down there. Even though it's I don't want it to move, so a while ago, oh, those are hot. Now I'm going to add my flux to the opposite side of my heat. I can see my flux starting to melt. There goes my solder melting. Take away your heat. Add a little more. That looks awesome. Add a little bit of flux to clean it up. Alright, so now we're going to put this last one. I'm going to go ahead and put some flux on this one. So what has been working for me, I'm just going to show you. So if I add heat to this end of the fitting or this side of the fitting, I'm going to try to add my solder to the opposite side. And then I'm just going to wrap it around. Just help that solder move. This flux is going to melt, and if I add heat to this end, the solder is going to naturally going to want to go to that heat. That's going to suck it into that fitting. And so and you see my flame is real low. I really want it even lower than that, just where I don't have any kind of sound, because you want to heat it up real slow. And then add your solder, and then let it cool off. So your flux is melting. See if I can show you this. And you see it didn't take very long to heat up. Let me turn my light on a little bit. It didn't take long to heat up, and it didn't take very much solder. And that joint is just tight all the way around. I got a little spot right there that looks like it might not have as much solder, so I'm gonna heat it up a little bit. Add a little bit right there. And I think we may have got it a little bit crooked. Yeah, it looks like we got this one a little bit crooked. Might try to heat this up a little bit and straighten it. Just to heat this little bit right here up and straighten it up a little bit. We'll add a little more flux to it since we moved it just in case.